We're going to be talking about transforming modern healthcare staffing today. My name is Pankaj. I'm joining you from San Francisco. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping tips here. Please feel free to ask any questions at any time via the Zoom Q&A panel. We will field all questions at the end, and we will save at least 15 minutes for the Q&A. So we'll have plenty of time to take your questions. The recording and presentation will be distributed to everybody afterwards. So, no need to make any notes. Please keep that in mind. And we will end on time, and we will stick to making sure that we are done before 12 o'clock. With that, I also want to invite my good friend Zia onto the webinar. Zia, if you would come say hello.
Good morning, Pankaj. How are you?
Hello. Very well,
everyone.
thank you.
Very nice to be here and super excited.
Thanks a lot. Zia, would you tell us a little bit about yourself? And then I'll do a short intro and we can jump right in.
Sure. I'm Zia Rahman, the founder and CEO of Wanderly. We started Wanderly back in 2017, and I'm excited to share what we're doing at Wanderly with partnership with Sense.
Thanks, Zia. And my name is Pankaj. I'm one of the founders of Sense. We started in the beginning of 2016, so about 4.5 years ago. The company is headquartered in San Francisco, which is where I'm joining you from today. Super excited about our partnership with Sense and Wanderly, but also more excited about the impact that we're bringing to the healthcare staffing industry and some demonstrated results that we've seen already. This will be our agenda for today. We're going to talk about some trends in the healthcare staffing industry and how they're changing rapidly. And consequently, we will also talk about how you can accelerate the hiring of healthcare staffing workers, how you can do more with less, whether it's rapid response or getting ready for what happens in the next couple of quarters. And towards the end of this conversation, I'll also walk you through a live demonstration of how Sense and Wanderly, both of our platforms, work together. And then, of course, we'll end with a Q&A session. So let me start by giving you a little bit of an overview on Sense for those of you who are not familiar with the company. Like I said, we started about 4.5 years ago. We have over 300 customers today. And Sense's main mission when we started was to be the #1 engagement and communication platform that was designed specifically for the staffing industry. Every single one of our customers is a staffing firm, which means every feature that we design, every piece of analytics that we expose keeps staffing professionals, staffing executives in mind. We already work with 1/3 of the largest staffing companies in the US. Staffing Industry Analysts tracks a list of the largest staffing firms in the US that are over $100 million in revenue. As you can see, we work with 1/3 of them already. But at the same time, we have a number of customers that have between $0 to $10 million in revenue, $10 to $50 million in revenue, and $50 to $100 million in revenue. As a SaaS platform, we just wanted to make sure that we democratize technology and those efficiencies are available to everyone. We're backed by Google Ventures and Axel Partners. And in the 4.5 years that the firm has been around, we've raised about $24 million in venture funding from these companies. 3 key pillars that Sense was built on were growth, retention, and automation. Growth essentially talks about top of the funnel. How do we add more candidates to your top of the funnel? How do we activate more people who are already sitting in your database? How do we essentially increase placements for you and increase top line revenue for you? Retention talks about reducing your attrition, increasing your redeployment, essentially making sure that you can get more profit out of the folks that you're currently working with. So this impacts directly your bottom line and stops the leaky bucket syndrome that all of you are very familiar with in the staffing industry. And then automation, probably one of the most important topics today, is what automates everything that's non-productive time for your recruiter. Everything that they're doing that's not human stuff, that's not talking to a candidate. How do we automate that? How do we make it, any kind of a mistake-proof system? And at the same time, how do we make sure that things run on an autopilot even when your firm is sleeping? We hope to talk a lot more about this, but I'm going to ask Zia to tell us a little bit more about Wanderly.
Sure, thanks, Pankaj. All right, Wanderly started back in February of 2017. And when we first started, there was a lot of confusion about what Wonderly was all about. But in a nutshell, Wonderly is really a recruitment marketplace where we really work very closely with our agency partners and our MSP VMS partners to help source, to help recruit, to help place candidates, primarily in the contingent healthcare staffing industry. Really at the core of Wonderly, it's all about the workforce experience, recruiter experience, and speed to market. And you'll hear me talk a great deal about speed to market is quite important as we try to help our agency partners and MSP partners. And the key to that is, you know, due to this COVID-19, Wonderly really was able to help. And I will talk a lot about that as we move on through these slides. The other three principles or pillars that Wonderly was built on is how do we ensure that the workforce side issues were managed properly. And that's really where Wonderly started back in 2017. We wanted to create a very transparent site, meaning from a workforce perspective, they were challenged to find out in terms of what their pay packages would look like. So we built a platform where all the pay packages that our agency partners are putting up there, including the MSP partners, have complete transparency. So the workforce can make a very informed decision. Second, very importantly, was to ensure that it's a neutral platform. We're obviously not an agency, we're a marketplace. So all our agencies are posting their pay packages. So truly it is a neutral platform where the workers can go and see and compare and contrast and make an informed decision to actually take the position. And then, as you can naturally see, once you have transparency, once you have neutrality, it really garners the trust of the workforce. And we wanted to get get the trust from our workforce, because that's really the key of this, is how do we get the workforce to trust our information, because they are making decisions about their livelihoods. And so that's really what drove us to start Wonderly. Of course, behind that is a lot of technology. Behind that is lots of behavioral analysis that we do to make sure that the job that they are applying for is the one that they're looking for. And we're really excited to able to press Wonderly to the next level by engaging and partnering very tightly with Sense. And so that's in a nutshell the background of Wonderly.
Thanks, Zia. That was super helpful. And since you talked about COVID, I'm going to take a clue from what you just said and jump right into how healthcare has changed, specifically because of COVID. As you can see, this has been just a macro impact on the industry. Temporary health services have declined. Hospitals have increased costs and revenue losses. The GDP is now going to contract. But what I wanted to spend more of my time on was actually talk about the opportunity that this presents. And there is a huge opportunity in the healthcare staffing market. Now, some of you might have already seen a temporary spike in demand because of COVID-related jobs, contact tracers, temperature checking, so on and so forth. But what's also going to happen now is, as we start to come out of this pandemic, hospitals are going to start getting back into elective procedures that they hadn't done before or had put on pause. And there is also going to be a sudden spike in demand for all the workers that have taken a backseat right now. You can see some of this data right here. The healthcare temporary staffing market is actually going to grow this year, and locum tenens segments will grow even faster. RN demand is going to go through the roof over the next decade. And this is going to grow, employment in healthcare is going to grow disproportionately. Zia, I don't know if you have thoughts that you want to add here, but I wanted to, first present the group with the huge opportunity that this presents for your industry.
Right. It's very true. It's been quite challenging, especially related to non-COVID jobs that most of our agency partners were working to fill, but at the same time, the electives, the hospitals shutting down the electives really caused dislocation from the workforce perspective, and how do we get them to continue to work. But because of because what Wonderly was built, it really has the rapidness and speed to market to get this workforce to the hospitals. We were able to help a lot of our agency partners and MSP partners, and some of them are very large MSPs who had exclusive contracts with a few cities, to be able to rapidly fill these positions. And so I think, yes, it's been a huge challenge right now. I'll give you some data points on Wanderly. Prior to COVID, we at any given time, we would have 30,000 plus pay packages open. But if you go to Wanderly today, you will see roughly about 9,000 pay packages open. That is real, that is true. But to your point, Pankaj, we're beginning to see the hospitals open up slowly. And I believe that you will start to see a lot of these positions open up. And we're looking on a day-to-day basis where the numbers are. And actually, you can use Wanderly to get a nice feel for where the current jobs are, current needs are. And we'll get into all the analytics that gives you a heat map of the reality of today's workplace in terms of what the demands are. But
Totally.
I think we'll talk a little bit about what these challenges actually presented from the perspective of opportunities.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. I mean, not only does this open an opportunity, now is also the time for you to start thinking about how do you transform your staffing firm to be ready for this upcoming demand and to essentially, do more with less. I mean, I know it's a cliche, but we are now all being asked to do more with less. There are several studies floating around that are saying every recruiter will probably talk to 4 times the number of candidates to make a hire because of the amount of talent that's available, because of the amount of people that are actually applying for jobs. What you're seeing on this slide is very representative of what we see with our customers. This is essentially a syndrome of leaky talent pipeline, as well as drop-offs during every stage of the candidate life cycle. In a typical staffing firm, if you start with about 1,000 candidates, you'd be lucky if 10% of them actually get to a point that they have an offer. So 100 of those people who are actually slated to join. And then several of them would drop off before they actually start. It's a competitive market. People will leave you for a better pay package. People will leave you for a better job location. And of the folks who start, there are several that won't finish the assignment. Sometimes it's just the lodging that you are being kept in. Sometimes it's the work hours. Sometimes it's the work pressure. Sometimes it's the lack of engagement. And of course, of the people who finish this assignment, there are very few people that actually get redeployed. So these are some of the key KPIs that we track for our staffing customers and healthcare staffing firms. And you can see some of this data on the right-hand side, which is actually validated by SIA. Up to 80% of travelers would drop out of the funnel just during the hiring process. 51% of the nurses are saying that they're worried that the job is affecting their health. So this is actually the time to invest more in engaging with your constituents, engaging with folks who are producing revenue for you, but at the same time creating loyalty and memorable experiences. And this is before I started Sense. I ran 2 different staffing companies. So this is very near and dear to my heart. This is exactly what recruiters are buried with today. They probably have 15 different point solutions that every single recruiter works on today. The whole vision with Sense and Wanderly is to give you that single system of engagement that fills your top of the funnel pipeline. But using Wanderly, it actually fills your top of the funnel pipeline with people who have intent to take an offer, people who are much down funnel than just thousands of candidates that you can pick up from a traditional job board. And then engage them deeply via Sense, use 2-way text messaging to stay in touch with them, and essentially use just the 1-2 punch of Sense and Wanderly to enable your recruiters to do more. Zia, I'm sure you have something you want to say here.
Sure, Pankaj. If you don't mind, would you mind going back to the funnel?
Yeah.
And I can speak a little bit to that to complement what you just said. Great. So I know, Pankaj, you've heard me talk about this quite a bit, which is I call Wanderly is helping you not fill the top of the funnel, but it's an upside down funnel. And this is where I think Wanderly and Sense makes perfect sense. Pun intended, I suppose. That'll happen quite a bit today. It's important to understand, this partnership and this technology that's coming together and the power of that. Where Wanderly sits is we sit on the sourcing side of this for brand new candidates who are actually looking to get into the workforce. And they may be staff nurses that are looking to explore travel nurses, or they may be nurses who haven't worked for a while, or they may be needle in a haystack. So through the process of Wanderly, because of the transparency, neutrality, and the fact that it's trusted, it's important to understand when I say we are filling the upside down funnel. What I mean by that is the nurse, I'll use nurse as an example, but any contingent workforce, the nurse goes through all the due diligence process on Wanderly platform, and then she decides to actually apply to the agency. And this is critical because what we find through the data is a lot of the ghosting is eliminated. The fact that and I think everyone here knows the term ghosting. And what we do with that is it's very important. Recruiters spend so much of their time trying to chase the nurse. The nurse is supposed to start working, they have ghosted. So Wanderly filters through all that, provides that one-to-one mapping, if you would, to the recruiter. And then the recruiter takes over and works that nurse from a engagement perspective. And of course, as the nurses are ending, the redeployment part. So it's important to understand where Wanderly begins and ends and where Sense picks up. And together, I think you really have a 360-degree view of the candidate journey. And so I just wanted to make that point here.
Yeah,
that's critical. And part of your demo will demonstrate that, of course.
Yeah, no, Zia, thanks for that insight. So, to sum up everything that we've talked about so far, I think you've heard us all say these three things over and over again. Speed to market is super critical. This is an industry that is very much mobile first. People are in hospitals, they are in facilities. They're not necessarily sitting on a desk looking at a computer. So everything that you're doing from a technology standpoint has to be mobile first. And obviously, transparency is super, super important. I mean, that's always been important, but specifically in this industry, what we would enable is, hey, this is exactly what you're going to get. This is exactly the pay package that you would be offered. This is exactly the amount of money that you would take home, so on and so forth. But all of these three key tenets wouldn't mean anything if you did not deliver a memorable, personalized experience. That's now table stakes. Every candidate now expects that from you. That's the only kind of staffing firm that they're going to work with, where they feel like they were treated specially, and you essentially were looking out for their unique needs. So this leads us into what are some of the gains that you can achieve across the entire talent life cycle. What you see here is a talent life cycle going from the very first time you talk to a candidate when you're sourcing or attracting them, to having them go through multiple assignments, redeploying them, and eventually reactivating them after a few years. As you can see across this entire life cycle, there are several places where technology can come and help you. And by technology, I mean the combination of Sense and Wanderly. In the sourcing and attraction part of this life cycle, you could source more candidates and reduce time to submit. That's the speed to market that we've been talking about. During candidate engagement, how do you increase your fill rate, which automatically helps you if, as Zia described, if you're looking at a funnel that was already pre-vetted. How do you reduce drop-off, which will obviously happen if you had candidates that had intent, which was already verified. As you go through this, how do you increase your net promoter scores, your Glassdoor scores, so other people in the industry know that you really take care of your people, and that's how they flock over to you. And then, of course, redeployment. In some senses, that is free money. I'm sure all of you CEOs and executives on the call closely track your cost per hire. You have literally no cost per hire if you redeploy somebody, and that money flows right down to your bottom line. So, what I think both Zia and I get a kick out of is looking at everything across this life cycle that our technology can actually affect. And that's what keeps me up at night. That's what keeps Zia up at night on how do we create these staffing companies of future that are doing more with less, that are using technology, but at the same time, they're coming across as extremely personalized and memorable. So, Zia, with your permission, now that we've talked a little bit about trends and we've talked about, how this industry is changing and what's needed, let's actually get down to the lick log of, how can you actually make this happen? What are some of the things that you can practically do to affect this change? I'm going to start by this slide, which is very near and dear to me. Every technology solution that exists today, you will see that a lot of them simply focus on finding a candidate and getting them to a point where they have an offer. So they're all focused a lot around top of the funnel. Those are your ATSs, your VMSs, your CRMs, your job boards. But once somebody gets an offer, the usefulness of all of these softwares, even put together, tapers off dramatically. But this is just the right point at which this individual has now started earning revenue for you. this is the point where you actually want to make sure that they're most well taken care of. And I think that's where technology comes in, where you can actually stay engaged with all of these people. If anybody's having a suboptimal experience, it is immediately flagged to you. You can immediately do something about it. So essentially, it's a very, very dynamic way of taking care of problems before they become festering issues. And so, if you're going to do that, you obviously are going to need an omni-channel approach. You have to live where your candidates live and where your customers live. If they want to communicate via text messaging, then that's what you use. If they want to communicate via email, then that's what you use. Some people prefer surveys, others would prefer giving you their overall experience as a single net promoter score number. What both of our technologies would allow you to do is use an omni-channel approach to make sure that you can reach out to everywhere where your candidates exist. And then, of course, as you do that, there are several workflows that you can create in our platforms. And those workflows can automate touches across the candidate lifecycle, but they can also take care of logistical things like onboarding, like expiring credentials, just getting an idea, just getting an alert on, hey, these credentials are expiring. So even if you get the next job, you might not be able to start that quickly. Zia, you can probably add more color here because you do a lot of this with Wanderly as well.
Yeah, and I think, what drew me to Sense, when I met you and Anil and Alex a few years ago is in our space, and I've been in the contingent space since 2005, and having run a couple of agencies, firsthand experience a lot of these challenges. We all as agencies have, to your earlier diagram, all of us, it's mandatory. You have to have an applicant tracking system and a CRM system. And we begin to fill that up with databases of names and phone numbers and email addresses. And we're cold calling, we're texting, we're doing all of these things. And as the industry matured, as various technologies came in to help us, because as an agency owner, we were overwhelmed in how do we reach out? How do we re-engage? How do we communicate in a meaningful, scalable way? We began to then, okay, let's add a texting to our applicant tracking system. And we said, let's go ahead and add a mass email software, and let's go ahead and, okay, then how do we send these campaigns to them? And we hire some people to manage that. So, and I think that's great. And that's what the industry was calling for, is we need all these tools. But then to have this a holistic approach where you don't have all these gaps in data going from one system to another system and losing sight and visibility. Because in order for you to properly service the workforce, and I will keep going back to the experience of the workforce and the experience of the recruiter in this case, is you want to free them from all those tedious work and allow the workflow, which is key here, the workflow of Sense to take over and complement all these, all the things that a recruiter does, and free them up to build the relationship, the human relationship, not manually texting, manually calling. I mean, that's great. There's a place for that, but scalability wise, you hit a ceiling. And that's where I think Sense sits really nicely on top of the applicant tracking systems. Wanderly integrates with the applicant tracking system. And we'll talk a little bit about the future of where Wanderly and Sense is going in terms of total 360-degree view of the candidate, and as well as the recruiter having visibility into the candidate. So I get excited. I'm sorry, Pankaj, when I talk about workflow and automating and helping all the agencies, partners out there to really garner the speed to market that's needed.
No, absolutely. No, Zia, I can see the passion in your voice, and this is exactly what I am passionate about. Every staffing firm that we talk to has point solutions, something to send out an email, something to do an NPS survey, something for text messaging, something for just event RSVPs, something to do a survey. And you just need a single solution that will actually combine all of those and actually integrate with your applicant tracking system. Zia, I know you had a huge sort of story here with the Republic that you might want to share a little bit about.
Yeah, it's important. I mean, that's Scott Martindale. He's the founder and CEO of Republic, and one of our great clients, and seeing a lot of successes with Wanderly. He was one of the early adopters of Wanderly, and there's a story behind this, and it's important to understand. And I think Scott saw this early on as he helped cross the chasm, if you would, of Wanderly as an early adopter. I think, when I first started Wanderly, I've heard from a lot of the agencies that, Zia, you're really not helping this industry in a sense. It's becoming, the pay packages are the competitive advantages. And my answer to them was, your nurses are out there looking at the pay packages that your recruiters are giving, and they're taking it to these big Facebook groups and putting them out there and saying, this is what my agency is offering. What do you guys think? So, the social media, the Facebook groups of the world have really empowered the workforce, and you have to figure out a way, and Scott saw this early on, you have to figure out a way to be totally transparent, and that's at the core of what Republic is about, is totally transparent. And all I did was enabled him with a platform where he can put these and show it to this workforce. So we're excited. I mean, they see, well, on average, our agency sees about 22% conversion rate in terms of the applications that we're providing. When a nurse decides to apply to Scott and other agencies, on average, we're seeing 22% conversion rate from an application to submission. I mean, that's really, really high. And the placement rates are quite high. So we thank Scott for giving us the opportunity to showcase Wanderly. And now we've got, close to 50 agencies that are on our platform. So
that's awesome. And since you talked about conversion rates, I mean, the one thing I wanted to also touch upon is this is a stat that was just astounding to me. I said in the beginning that we work with over 300 staffing companies, and as we work with them today, we've now found out that nearly all of the staffing companies that we work with, 50% of the placements that they make every year actually come from people who already existed in their candidate database. These were folks you already had. You've already paid for them at some point by getting them through a job board or a referral network or scraping the web or whatever you've done, but you've built this wealth of information that you already have. Yet every single year you're paying the same amount of money to the job boards, and maybe even more. But if you had a way to refresh and reactivate your own database, if this was a source of truth that you can trust on, if you knew exactly when people are going to be available, who's exactly looking for a job, potentially in an ideal world, you can reduce your job board spend by 50%. We have several of these case studies. That are public on our website with our customers who've saved hundreds of thousands of dollars and in some cases millions of dollars on job board spend because they're actually able to just reactivate their own database. Here is an example of a customer we started with recently, and I won't go through the entire detail here, but you can see, an assignment that required them to deliver 120 nurses in less than 10 days. This is Wind and Stark. And they essentially said leveraging Sense Engage was part of a multi-pronged strategy to help do that. Essentially, what they were doing with Sense was they were going back into their entire database, people that they've worked with over the last decade. And within a few clicks, they're able to send out a message to hundreds of thousands of people and find out things like, are you available for a job right now? When will you be next available? And that information is dynamically updated right within your ATS and actually triggers an alert to a recruiter. So some of the things that, some of the workflows that I want to talk about today along with Zia are just workflows that hopefully are just very, very practical, just absolutely have an impact on your business and P&L right away. I'll let Zia talk a little bit more about transparency because, this is obviously huge in the travel nursing division, in the travel nursing part of the world on, what exactly are they going to get paid.
Right. So there's some screenshots here where you can see some of the agencies on the right. So, it's arguable any given day how many jobs that are really open. And theoretically, if you think about this, if there are 5,000 jobs open any given time, and there are various numbers of how many agencies have access to all of these 5,000 jobs. Let's say there are 800 agencies out there, and all these 800 agencies posting these 5,000 different jobs. Each job is represented on ZipRecruiter or Indeed or Google Jobs, 800 different ways. And if I were an ICU nurse looking for a job at UCLA, and there are 800 representations of the same job with different formats, and it may appear there are 800 different jobs. So what we've done with our patent pending technology is we can take all these jobs in real time from our agency partners and including directly from VMS and MSP and push them right into Wanderly and convert them all into one job. And you then expand it out and you can see side by side what each agencies are willing to pay. And what it boils down at the end of the day is certainly, yes, we empower the workforce to compare, but they're really picking the agency they want to work for benefits, for customer service experience they may have had or heard. To Pankaj's point, the reviews are very critical. And so putting all of that information together, that's how they select someone. And by the way, it's important to point out is we are not a database at Wanderly. And if you come to us and saying, Zia, do you have, how many RNs do you have in your system? I will disappoint you. What I will tell you is we have 74% of the travel nurses who have come individually to our sites and decided to sign up and fill their profiles. So there is no mass database that I will sell you. And the other data point I'll give you is, is any given day, we have about 2,500 to 4,000 daily active users that are looking for a job. And you couple that with what Sense has, where Sense is mining your database and finding the right needle in the haystack and getting you connected. So these 2,500 doesn't sound a lot, or 4,000 doesn't sound a lot from a daily active users. But when you multiply that out for a potential $150,000 revenue annualized, that's hundreds of millions of dollars that are on Wanderly platform that go into the agency and then show up into the database, where then Sense picks up and redeploys them as needed. So
yeah.
I know I'm running long here, but I won't go through all the other things, but we just simply don't sell database. That's not what we're about. Not a single person from our platform is sold to the recruitment side. The recruiters, and it's a marketplace, two-sided marketplace. They come together and naturally things happen from there. So.
Yeah, no, Zia, that makes total sense. And this is actually the main integration point for Sense and Wanderly. So the moment you have found out that here is a candidate, or here is a nurse that's on the Wanderly system, they've looked through a job, they've picked out a pay package, and they've said, this is the company I want to apply with, and this is what I'm going to demonstrate. With a single click, they can then launch Sense messaging, which you're seeing right here on this screen. It's a two-way text messaging platform. Right from the Wanderly website, they'll be able to launch a Sense extension that'll then send out a text message to whoever you want to reach out to. So if you're a recruiter, you can reach out to 10 different nurses or 100 different nurses and say, hey, found this really new, found this job that you might be interested in, sending this over to you. You can send them the job description. You can actually send them more information about the job. It seamlessly happens right from the Wanderly website. And the reason text messaging is important, I mean, we talked before about mobile first, mobile first being the main practice here. But the reason it's important is we see 90% of the people who read their text messages, and most people will respond within 90 seconds. So oftentimes we'll do this live for our customers, where they'll push out a job to 100 people and they'll start having 25 conversations, 30 conversations right away. And within minutes, sometimes they will actually start submitting candidates to their customers. Here is another customer spotlight on where we are seeing that. This is a customer of ours called Acor. What's interesting with Acor is we set them up recently, and it was very heartening to hear that they said, we've taken 20 years to get to this point. They've actually had their best ever month in April, and it was Sense that they said delivered exactly what they needed. Not only are they using multiple different workflows, they're actually using Sense to increase retention. They're actually using Sense to reach out to their database. They're actually using Sense to engage with people who are currently on assignment. So they're actually using full life cycle engagement and essentially have freed up nearly 40% of their recruiter time. This is also pretty close to my heart, which is transparency as well as NPS. Sense will automate all NPS for you. So unlike any other point solutions that you might be using today, where you can only do an NPS survey twice a year, thrice a year, once a quarter, you can use Sense to trigger an automated NPS message whenever you like. Maybe you've decided that this is a message that should go out 2 weeks after somebody's been on assignment. So different messages are going out every day, but you're getting a consistent dynamic score on what people feel like has been their experience with your firm 2 weeks after they've started. Or you could separate it out and say, I want to send this just to my nurses. I want to send this just to my locum tenens. I want to send it to just a particular hospital facility, just a particular area, whatever you might like. Like I mentioned before, as your NPS score increases or as somebody actually gives you a positive score, we will redirect those folks to social media. If somebody is a promoter in your company, somebody rated you a 9 or a 10 on a scale of 10, those are the folks that you can send wherever you want, to Facebook, to Glassdoor, to some travel nurse specific review sites. These are all 100% dynamic. You choose where you want this traffic to go. And of course, if somebody gave you a score that wasn't as flattering, instead of seeing this message, they'll see another message that says, really sorry to hear you didn't have the best experience with us. When can we get in touch with you? Or click here to schedule an appointment with us, or tell us what went wrong. So not only are you providing white glove service to people who don't have the best things to say about you, at least for the moment, you're also keeping them away from social media and only sending your promoters onto the social media and actually increasing your net promoter score and your Glassdoor scores. This is probably one of the most used use cases of Sense, which is how do you automate redeployment and contract extensions? This could simply happen by just building automated workflows where 30 days before, 15 days before, whatever the case might be, before a contract is finishing, you can automatically reach out to both your healthcare professional as well as your customer. So you can reach out to the hiring manager and say, hey, are you planning on extending this resource, so on and so forth. If they are, the extension gets processed automatically. It updates your applicant tracking system automatically. And if they aren't, we can automatically start a workflow that says, let's start putting Ashley or Rachel into a redeployment workflow. They're going to be coming out. We now know this. They have about 30 days left on this job. Let's find them a new job. You could then engage Wanderly to find out, hey, where else would these jobs be available? You could do that with our integration, but at the same time, you can also make sure that you transparently let your associate know, so they know that somebody is taking care of them. This is healthcare support is a customer that's been working with us for over 3 years now. They're a huge fan of Sense, and you can see, some of the things that I've been talking about so far. Our response rates there are over 40%. But this is the one that's very close to my heart. The candidates who interact with us via Sense are 4 times more likely to stay on assignment with us. That's how dramatically we can change your retention rates, simply because you're being transparent, you're giving them a personalized, memorable experience. A lot of this information is obviously available on our website, and we're happy to share a larger case study for anybody who's interested. But for this presentation, both Zia and I wanted to pick healthcare staffing customers where they've had a huge impact on their business, and this impact is measured directly in dollars and cents. Zia, this is again a fascinating slide for me. This will probably be very eye-opening to a lot of folks on the webinar. So I'll let you take this one.
Sure. So Wanderly itself has 3 different areas where one goes to. There's an agency-facing site, there's a recruiter-facing site, as well as a nurse-facing site. What you're looking at is the agency. This would be someone as a recruitment manager level, or executives who would be looking at this to make the day-to-day decision and figure out where the jobs are opening up. In this example, on the heat map, you can see what's lit up in orange is where nurses are looking for jobs, but not necessarily where the jobs are. So we can show you these relative demands, and even in real time, and you can drill down on these states and see exactly what the nurses were looking for. We also have things like pay package on demand. Given before COVID, we had 30,000 pay packages, but there are jobs that nurses are looking for that we don't have on our platform. What we do is we immediately send those out to all the recruiters in real time. And we allow the first three agencies to post the jobs and open for competitive reasons. And also we don't want to overwhelm the nurse, so they can open these jobs. But what you're looking at, what you would expect, top searches, locations, it's always, top 3 is California, Florida, and Texas. Specialties, as you would expect. And this allows you to see how you're doing in terms of receiving applications. The PPOD is what I was talking about, pay package on demand. So wherever there are gaps in jobs, we can cover that, and including chats, very important, because you're receiving on our platform and also on Sense, and you'll see that shortly, is on our platform, we get about 1 chat every 32 seconds. You want to make sure that your recruiters are responding to a chat. And oh, by the way, while I'm on this chat, we also have what's called virtual recruiter. When your recruiters go home after 5 p.m., you can turn that virtual recruiter on, and through machine learning and AI, we can actually respond very intelligently in natural language, because the goal is, there is a nurse looking for a job, 2 a.m. in the morning when the recruiters are sleeping. You don't want to lose that nurse, and keep it engaged, give her all the information she's looking for, and get her name and phone number, so when the person actually shows up, they can continue that conversation. So this allows you to measure, give you competitive advantage. It's a 24/7, 365 work platform, and you'll see that shortly on the engagement side and redeployment side. It continues with Sense. So.
Yeah, and speaking of analytics, this is probably an area I can spend an hour on, just talking about the kind of analytics that Sense can provide. First of all, we'll give you all the analytics that a typical CEO cares about. How many placements are you making? How many of them are redeployment? What's your average length of assignment? What's your average bill rate? What's your average gross margin? How many people have you redeployed? What percentage of your population you're redeploying? What's your net promoter score with your customers, with your contractors, with your own internal staff, so on and so forth. But what's more fascinating is that you can break this analytics down and slice it dice by any sliver you like. If you wanted to simply find out, how's my Chicago branch doing compared to my Dallas branch, you could simply do that. If you wanted to find out journey level analytics, so essentially said, hey, I kind of built this 15 touch points for on assignment. If somebody's on assignment, these are the 10 or 15 touch points that they should have. How many people are engaging with that versus a redeployment journey? So if you start to find out that people are liking content in a certain fashion more than the other, you can certainly make tweaks. We'll also do things like click tracking. So anytime you include any kind of a link in your message, a URL, a video, a photograph, we can actually tell you how many people clicked on it. So in some senses, think of this as just recruitment marketing automation. You can run drip campaigns via Sense, both for your customers as well as your candidates, so on and so forth. So, in summary, just to bring all of this together, this is essentially what the integration of Sense and Wanderly looks like. This is what we wanted to talk about today. This is what we wanted to announce today. I'll let Zia walk you through this slide, and then I'll actually show you this live right after this slide. So this will give you a good sense of how the two products work with each other.
Sure. Real fast. I know we're running short on time. So what you're looking at is one particular job represented as a card. And this is a recruiter's view where they want to take this particular job and potentially send it out to n number of nurses, so they can quickly send text messages or email those out in a rapid fashion. So in this case, you're looking at an allied job in Houston, Massachusetts, and you see the icon all the way to the right. And by simply clicking on that, that's the integration point where the texting gets integrated real nicely. So I'll turn that over to Pankaj, and you can go from there, Pankaj.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm actually going to take you guys through a live walkthrough. So give me just a second to set that up. Yeah, so if you're able to see my screen, what you're essentially seeing here is the Wanderly interface that Zia was talking about. Here is an RN job in Greenwich, Connecticut. They're telling you how many shifts you have to work, how long is the assignment, what are you going to get paid, so on and so forth. Now, if this is a job that you wanted to broadcast to a bunch of your applicants, you can actually see that there is a Sense integration right here. This is the Sense logo that you can click, and it brings up this Sense Chrome extension for text messaging. We've custom designed this for Wanderly. So as you can see here, it actually tells you, gives you a little warning and says, any recipient who replies with interest will receive a follow-up text message with a link to the job. Let me explain what we're trying to do here. If in the very first time you're reaching out to a bunch of your applicants or nurses in this case, you actually started sending them a link to a job, it's more likely to get filtered by your carriers. It's more likely to get marked as a spam. So we've pre-built automation here where you can actually reach out to somebody and say, hey, here is a new job that I wanted to tell you about. You can simply do that. But as soon as somebody responds back, we will immediately and automatically send them a link to the job. So, maybe you have a group of candidates called nurses. I've created a test group here that has 3 people in it. Of course, you could have 30, you could have 100, you could have 300, so on and so forth. You take a group of folks and maybe you are wanting to send them a message that says, and essentially, as you broadcast this message, the system asks you if you want to broadcast this immediately, just giving you a little bit of a sanity check here, because this could have been going on to 300 different people. And as soon as you broadcast this, you can see that this broadcast is now being sent out to 3 different people. And as soon as it goes out, people can start responding to these messages. You can start seeing exactly who's replied to this, who's not, so on and so forth. You can see here, this message has now been sent out to 3 people. Those 3 people were Kiz Richardson, Vincent Vega, and Elaine Benes. So these are 3 people who've already gotten this job. And if somebody responds, you'll also see their responses right here. And of course, well, somebody just responded. You can see that you will get individual responses right here as well. So here is Elaine who responded back with, I'm interested. So that's an individual response that came from her. Here is another individual response. And as soon as that response comes in, you can essentially see we can send an automated link that says, here is some more information. You can click on this link right here. You can compare the job. You can decide to apply for it. And from this point forward, we can go back and forth, and this can become a one-on-one conversation. So if you go back into broadcast, you'll see right here that while 3 people were sent this message, only 1 person has responded so far. But once they do respond, you can automatically convert these into one-on-one messages that you can then communicate on. Also, if you go into the Sense platform, you will see messaging analytics. You're going to see which of your recruiters are sending how many messages out, how many are outbound, how many are inbound, but most importantly, what's your response rate? You're seeing an average response rate. This is live data, by the way. So you're seeing an average response rate of about 72% of people responding. And more importantly, you can also see how quickly, what's the response time of your recruiters. So if you want to talk to somebody and say, hey, here is this person or this person who's taking way too long to respond back to people, but some of the folks here are getting back in seconds and minutes, that's how you can reduce your speed to market. So you would see this directly from Wanderly, where essentially anytime you're browsing through jobs, this could be dozens of jobs, anytime you figure out this is the particular job that I want to invite candidates to, click on the integration, start two-way text messaging, and then those messages will continue back and forth. You also have an iOS and an Android app from Sense Messaging that you will always have with you. So all the messages that I just sent out and the message that I had just gotten back from Elaine, that also came right to my mobile app as well. So we'll keep adding more and more integration points, but this was the first thing that we wanted to do, where the experience for the candidate becomes seamless, and as soon as messages keep going back and forth, they essentially become part of a journey. So with that, I'm going to bring us all back into Q&A. I know several of you have submitted Q&A questions over the course of the presentation itself. Please feel free to submit more questions. We're going to try and answer as many of them as we can right up until the top of the hour. All right, so the first question we have here is, how do you regulate what recruiters are texting candidates? Well, so so the first thing I would tell you is you can actually allow your recruiters to do free form texting if you would like. You could either do that, or you could actually create templates for your recruiters. So If I go back to what I was showing you earlier, you can actually go down to text messaging here, and you can see that you can actually use any template here. So you can create as many number of templates as you like. And these are exactly the messages your recruiters can send out. Hey, this is how I want to contact you if there's a new job opportunity. This is what we want to do as an application follow-up. If you wanted, you could standardize a lot of this language, but otherwise, if you wanted, you could certainly give them the ability to just type free-form text messages as well. Zia, I'm going to throw this next one at you. Which technology priorities are you seeing firms focus on most right now?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think we're seeing lots of, especially when I speak with the agency partners, they're looking primarily, how do I connect with, I have this database of 200,000, 300,000 nurses. How do I connect with them more efficiently? How do I know they're looking for a job out in the ecosystem? So I think, this is very critical, where Sense can help you to monetize your existing database and reconnect and redeploy. But we're connecting, as you know, Pankaj, us and you, where we give you a 360-degree view of what the nurse is thinking, where the nurse we believe is going to look for jobs. So you bring all of that together, it really gives you a technological advantage to find that needle in a haystack. That we all are trying to do, because it's speed to market, and you need to know who is looking for the job and how quickly you can place them. So it's primarily technologies that are helping, and people are going out and saying, I need a texting because I need to reach out to them. But I think texting alone doesn't get you there. You really need to have a complete package where you're not spending too much time from one database, import, export into another one, and import, and then finally go back into the applicant tracking system. So, our text messages go back and forth. Our messages go back and forth. So you have a holistic view of when the journey started and it continues.
Yeah, and I'll chime in on this to say that, more and more CEOs that I've talked to have told us that while they all have a system of record, it might be an ATS, it might be a CRM. If you're an MSP, it might be a VMS. What they've really been missing is a system of engagement, something that will actually do automation, database refresh, text messaging, maybe even conversational recruiting, and have a lightweight sort of chatbot in there to screen your candidates super quickly. But essentially a system that plugs bi-directionally with your system of record, writes information into your system of record, and really becomes the nervous system that pumps blood through what's starting to become more of just a dead database. The next question I'll take that somebody just asked is, if sent from within Wanderly, will the Chrome extension tie into the applicant tracking system and document that a Sense message was being sent out? That is absolutely correct. We will absolutely do that. So if you sent out a text message like I just did in the demonstration, any response that came back, like Elaine responded to me, would actually get written as a note in Elaine's personal note record, in her candidate note record. We can also do fancy things like telling you this was a note out, this was a note in. If you communicate with your candidates back and forth 15 times a day, we could also write a single daily digest. So instead of having 15 different notes being written into your ATS, you can just have a daily log of activity written right within your ATS as well. Zia, here's another one for you. What have been some successful drip campaigns for your nurses?
I think, Wanderly, obviously at the heart of that is it's also a marketing technology company. And we find from our side, it's primarily sending lots of information out to the social media as well. So when you start this job import with Wanderly, Wanderly is sending these out to ZipRecruiters. By the way, you don't have to pay. It's all included in Wanderly. I want to make that point. And I know a lot of our colleagues are spending a lot of money with ZipRecruiter and Indeed, and we also push it into Google. So I think, as they come back into our system, you can really see how we're filtering through Wanderly, and in terms of, we get all of these nurses applying, but we're filtering those through, and we're actually sending you the ultimate nurse that is that is looking for the job. So drip in our world is a little bit different than the way you do the drip campaign in terms of you're taking the masses and slowly bringing it down. In our case, it's kind of reversed. So, but Sense and Wanderly coming together really complements both ends of the spectrum of this drip campaign.
Yeah, and I'll add that to say you could build full-blown drip campaigns within Sense. Your traditional marketing automation drip campaigns. So if you're reaching out to a bag of candidates, you might say, here are 10 different touch points that I want over the next 20 days. So every 2 days, there are these drip campaign touch points that are going out. And anytime somebody responds, whether it's a positive response or a negative response, they will immediately be taken out of that workflow and can be sent into an alternate workflow, just what you would expect from a drip campaign. We'll take one last question, just in the interest of time. Somebody just asked, how quickly can you get up and running, and what does implementation cost? So I'll let Zia answer that as well. But from a Sense standpoint, our implementation, first of all, is really, really quick. We have API-based integrations with most applicant tracking systems. So, large ATSs that you're probably well aware of, as well as obviously a deep integration with Wanderly. So when you start with Sense, there are really only two things we have to do. One is just secure an API key that will help us access your data. And two, immediately start building journeys or workflows. We do all of the heavy lifting. We will always assign a customer success manager to everyone we work with. And that customer success manager becomes responsible for creating your journey, creating your content, essentially getting you up and live pretty quickly. With even some of our larger customers, we are fully live and running in less than 30 days. As far as implementation is the cost is concerned, Sense does not charge an implementation cost. Our view is that once we start working with a customer, they will be a customer with us for life. They will stay with us for multiple years. So we invest in them right up front as well. So our implementation cost is zero as long as we just keep working with you on a subscription basis. Zia, I didn't know if you wanted to add something as well.
Yeah, real quickly. I mean, it's similar in most cases. When someone comes on board, it takes us about 2 to 3 weeks to do the implementation. And the reason it takes 2 to 3 weeks is we would want to know what applicant tracking system you have. We connect with most applicant tracking systems, so it's quite seamless in that sense. So all the jobs would be coming over every night around 1 a.m. and convert them into pay packages on our site based on your rules. So where we spend time, we do a questionnaire with you. We can take state by state, workers' comp, state by state, every little details that builds your gross profit margin is what we're looking for. And we work with you hand in hand to create that all the way down to the pennies, what the pay packages should look like. And of course, that's just one half of it, posting jobs. The other half is sending the profiles back into your applicant tracking system. So, if you have eRecruit, you have Bullhorn, Blue Sky, API, we work with all of them. So we can take your jobs. We can also send everything electronic back to you or on behalf of you to VMS and MSP. So that's within 2 to 3 weeks, we can have you up and running.
Wonderful. Thank you, Zia. And with that, the one thing I wanted to say was any question that we did not get to, it's our promise to you that we would follow up individually and one-on-one, so you will absolutely get your answers. We will also follow up with a recording of the demo as well as the presentation. And both Zia and I would like to thank all of you for taking the time to spend this hour with us. It was absolutely amazing to talk a little bit about how we're transforming healthcare, and we hope to have several conversations with you here in the coming weeks.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks.